everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Myah and this is inspired by Myah. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to My name's Myah and this is inspired by Myah. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make patchwork pants from scratch but from upcycled materials. So as I stated in one of my previous videos, I've got all of my granddad's clothing, so I'm just going to try and make new garments out of them basically. It's really I'm not even gonna say simple actually. It's kind of, you need to have experience sewing, but I'm gonna try and break down what I'm doing as detailed as possible. I just want to note though, I do have some videos lined up where I'll be showing you the basics of sewing terminology, how to do like basic sleeves and well, hemming, like just basics of sewing, so look out for that. But without further ado, I'm just gonna go on to the clips of the garments that I have. So those are the garments that I'm working with, and I tried to keep a springy, summery kind of colour theme with the neutral greys and beiges, but then I thought maybe a little pop of yellow would be nice, and you know, June the 21st is coming, lockdown will be over, so it's time to actually make an effort with our clothes now, but I'm still keeping the comfort levels with this design. So I digitized my design with Adobe Illustrator and finalized what kind of details I wanted, and then I went to Photoshop and started to add my colors in. I just took a photo of my garments and used that to get as close to the true color of the fabric, but it came out quite dark and saturated, so I had to kind of fine tune it to make it lighter to match my actual fabric, just to give a more accurate idea of what it will look like. But once I was happy with it all, I just sent it to print. So here's a sample of the style of trouser I'm going to do. It's just a straight leg pant with hip pockets, a zipper fly and patch pockets on the back. Now I needed to transfer my design lines onto the pattern. I tried to get it as close to the photo as possible, but some pieces are just a bit shorter than the design. Because it's a patchwork pant, each pant leg, front and back, is different. So once I marked my design lines on one side, I flipped the pattern, traced any pattern info like darts and pocket placement, and then just continued referencing my design to mark my lines. So now I need to add seam allowance to all these pieces, so I just took a piece of paper, placed it on top and traced around the pattern piece. My pattern already had seam allowance included, so when I was tracing the pieces, I added seam allowance to the areas that will get connected to the other pieces on the outside. And then I marked the existing seam allowance in on the inner part of the pattern. Then once I finished doing that, I labelled the piece and continued doing it for the rest of my pattern pieces. So I've made all my pattern pieces and cut them out now, and I've just categorised them in like front left leg, front right leg, right back and then left back. But I've also labelled the pattern pieces. So for example, on the left front leg, I've labelled it pattern piece 4. So I know that goes there, but then on my template here, I can locate it easily. So it's the left on the front 4, which is right there. So I know that I need to cut the piece out in this fabric basically, and obviously I've grouped all of the ones that will be cut together out of that fabric there, so that's how I'm going to go about doing it. And these are the rest of the pieces that we're going to need for the trousers. So I've got the patch pocket for the back, the front waistband you're going to need 2 of, the back waistband can be cut on the fold, and then I've got the zipper fly cover which will just neaten up the inside of the pants when we do the zip, and this is just traced off that part of the pattern basically, but you're going to need 2 of these. And then for the hip pocket, we've got about 3 pieces. Sometimes this piece will be like that in one fabric, but because I'm patchworking fabrics together, they're going to be different thicknesses, so I don't want my trousers to come out bulky, so I'm going to cut this piece out in the fabric that I want to be shown, but then these 2 pieces are going to be cut out in a thinner lining. Time to unpick all the clothes now. This is going to take me probably like a couple of hours, so I got my laptop ready, some water because I'm not drinking tea because I'm getting addicted to it, but let's get started.
Where do I start? I don't want to do this. Get comfy. Why is this so tough? Arm pain. Okay, that was satisfying. Did I break a nail? What am I doing? Stretch.
Hey y'all.
I just wanted to say, follow me on Instagram at inspiredbymyah.uk and TikTok at inspiredbymyah. I'm trying to post a bit more, but you'll see my final projects on there. And on TikTok, I'm trying to be a lot more active, but just showing kind of like behind the scenes. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to my channel and smash the like button. Anyways, let's get back into the video. So after I finished unpicking, I just put all my pieces in the wash and left them to dry overnight, and then I ironed all my pieces just to make sure there's no creases in them when I'm cutting the pattern pieces out, because that will cause inaccuracies and there may have been like a little fold in there, then the pattern doesn't line up and stuff. I mean, you just want to avoid that stuff as much as possible. So then I went ahead and just started to cut out all the pattern pieces using that system that I described earlier. And guys, this was so long. So to cut out my pattern pieces, I laid the fabric right sides facing up and put the pattern directly on top. Now with my pattern, I labeled it on top, on the right side, basically the side that's going to be the good side of the fabric. So I just laid that down directly onto the fabric and traced around it with a water soluble marker. Now because I'm patchworking, the fabric has different thicknesses, so I needed to try and make them all as even as possible. So with the mustard yellow fabric, it was a bit of a dress pant material, so it kind of had a bit of looseness to it. So I decided to interface it with a medium interfacing, and I ironed it on the floor and it wasn't sticking, and I was like, hold on, it's not working. But then I realized it just wasn't hot enough and I had to iron it on the other side and stuff, so I got it to work in the end. But I was worried then because I was thinking, how am I going to do this now? I was thinking I might have to line the pants, but it all worked out in the end. I almost forgot to mention, you want to copy all your pattern piece information onto the fabric. So in this shot you can see me just transferring the dart and where the pocket's gonna go. Okay, so now we need to organize our fabrics so that we can assemble them quickly and easily. I started to tackle the add-ons like the hip pocket and the patch pocket first. So for the hip pocket, you want to place your lining right sides facing up and the main fabric right sides facing down. Then just start pinning around the curve. At first it will seem a bit tricky. I'm saying seam, but it really does seam up difficultly. No, let me stop. Let me leave that to Makara Chewers. But anyways, it will seem tricky, but it's kind of like a sleeve because the curvy bit is naturally cut on the bias. It's easy to ease into the other piece basically. So this may sound a bit confusing, but I've got some basic sewing videos coming up so you can understand what I'm saying. So yeah, I just pinned and then took it to the sewing machine and slowly started sewing around the curve. Take your time to avoid any puckers. Then your pieces should look like this. I just top stitch around the pocket and then ironed it so that everything lays flat. Whilst I was ironing the hip pockets, I took the opportunity to prepare the patch pocket, so I just ironed the bottom and sides in by 1 centimeter, and then I overlocked the top of the pocket. Then I ironed the top down 1 centimeter, took it to the sewing machine and sewed a straight stitch. Then I decided to do another stitch quite close to it just to add a bit more detail to the pocket. So next I took one of the top back leg pieces and sewed the darts. I marked my darts on the right side of the fabric, but it's easier to sew if you have the guide on the wrong side. So to transfer them to the other side, I poked a pin at the bottom of the dart and drew a dot where it came through. Then I just connected it back up with the top marks. To sew them, I folded the dart so the lines connect, and when I put the pin in, I make sure it goes through the line on both sides so that I'm sewing it accurately. To get your darts looking as neat as possible, I recommend back stitching at the start but not at the end. You want to hand tie your pieces. This just eliminates that pucker a little bit that you can get when you back stitch. After I sewed the darts, I placed the patch pockets on top of my guide and lined everything up. To make sure the pockets lay flat, you can pin it down, but I felt confident enough to just go ahead and sew it. I did a stitch quite close to the edge and then another one just for more detail, but if I was to do this again, I would do the second stitch about 0.8 to a centimeter away from the first one, because that's what a classic jean pocket looks like and I just think it looks better. Now I can concentrate on assembling the pant leg, so I started with the back and just placed all my pieces in order and then started to sew them to each other. With patchwork, you have to be logical about how you piece things together, like a jigsaw puzzle. So, for example, with this piece, I have to attach these pieces together before I sew it to the other piece, because it would be so much more difficult to sew the pieces onto a corner. So I just continued to seam the patchwork together, and then after every seam I ironed it open and overlocked each side. So this is called an overlocked open seam. I did these because just in case I make a mistake, it will be easier to fix, and also they work better because they lay better. For some of the pieces I added top stitches for detail, but some were because the fabric wasn't laying flat enough for my liking. Then I gave it all one last iron, and now it's time to connect the two back pieces together. To do this, just place your pieces on top of each other, right sides facing, and sew along the curve with a straight stitch. Again, I did an open overlock seam, and then I also top stitched on both sides of the fabric. Now the back is complete, we need to move on to the front, so again, just patchwork each pant leg together like we did the back. So now the front's assembled, we need to finish the hip pockets, so I placed the second bag lining piece right sides facing on top of the front pant leg, then pinned and sewed with a straight stitch. This one is much easier to sew than the last curvy one. Once you've done that, you want to snip the fabric to release the tension and then iron the bag in towards the wrong side of the fabric. You want to make sure the lining isn't showing on the front side. Now we're going to do a top stitch again with the seam allowance facing the lining to keep everything on one side. Now we need to place the other hip pocket piece right sides facing down on top of the other bag piece, and make sure to line the top up well so that it makes the complete waist of your pant. Now pin all around the bag and sew with a straight stitch. I also went ahead and overlocked the main fabric pocket piece so that it doesn't fray. You don't have to overlock the top and the side seams right now because we still need to work on them. Next I gave everything a last iron, and now we're moving on to the zipper fly. Now this is the most trickiest bit of this project, so I'm going to try and explain it briefly, but I will do a more in-depth tutorial on this in the future. So first I sewed the center front of the pant legs together. You want to sew the crotch with a straight stitch, but then the zipper fly area needs to be sewn with a basting stitch. Now don't back stitch on the basting stitch because this is going to get removed later. Next I just ironed open the zipper fly area to make it as flat as possible, and then I placed the zipper facing down on top of the left side of the zipper fly. If you're doing this for men's, you want to place it on the right side. Then I pinned it to the edge of the zipper fly piece only, don't pin through all the layers. Next I changed my machine foot to a zipper foot and sewed on the side of the zip furthest from the basting stitch seam. Then I flipped the zip over and top stitch so it lies flat. Now you want to fold only the zip over onto the other side of the zipper fly and sew through the 3 layers, so the zip, the zipper fly and the front fabric. Pin through these layers and turn your pant over. Now we need to mark a guide to sew, but when you're doing this, ensure that all the layers are being caught. Now sew carefully along that line and go slow to get a smooth curve at the end of the zipper fly. Once you get to the center seam, back stitch right in the middle and stop. I removed my lines just so you can see what it looks like a bit more clearly. Now carefully unpick the basting stitches and test the zip out. The last step is to add the zipper cover. Earlier I mentioned that you need 2 of these, but I was wrong, it actually needs to be cut on the fold. So I did that and just overlocked the edges so it doesn't fray. So if you look on a pair of zipper pants, they all have this modesty panel kind of thing, and we need this so the waistband can be attached to it and we have a place for the button to go. So I pinned it to the zip on the right side and then turned my pant around to see what it would look like. I moved mine over slightly, repinned, and then sewed right on top of that top stitch we did earlier. It can be quite tricky to get it bang on your old line, so if you prefer, just do a stitch parallel to it. Now we're on to a much easier task, so you want to place your pants right sides facing, line up your side seams, and make sure the pocket bag is trapped in this seam so that it stays put. Then pin and sew with a straight stitch. Again, I'll be doing an open overlocked seam. So this next task is kind of tricky, but not too hard, but it's the waistband. So to start, I cut all my pieces out and assembled them at the side seams with a straight stitch. Now with the lining piece, you want to cut the pieces out the other way around, so once it's assembled and we put the pieces right sides facing, they match up, if that makes sense. I've kind of tried to show you in this video here. I also decided to do some detailing by just putting some top stitches on the seams. Next you want to pin all along the top of the waistband, not the bit that will get attached to the pants, and then just do a straight stitch. Now snip the seams to release the tension, iron it flat and top stitch the seam allowance to the lining. Next I just added my label to the lining and overlocked the bottom edge of the lining. Now this is the point where we want to trap our belt loops, so I pinned where I wanted them to go and did a small stitch to keep them in place. Then I pinned the right side of the waistband to the right side of the pant, matching up your side seams, and did a straight stitch all along the edge. As you can see, my waistband is really long, and that's because I extended the front just to make sure I have enough. But to seal the edges, you want to fold the waistband right sides facing over the pant and do a straight stitch as close as you can to the ending of the zipper fly on both sides. Then trim the edges so it has sharp corners when we turn it. Now we need to iron that seam and iron the belt loops upwards, then pin along the waistband, making sure the lining is lying flat on the other side. Now you can either do a top stitch or a stitch in a ditch to close up the waistband completely. When you're doing your top stitch though, go over the belt loops to secure them in place, then fold the top of them in and stitch them down too. I'm sorry guys if you didn't understand that explanation, but don't worry, that will be something I'll cover in the basic sewing series soon. Now we need to sew the seam of the pants, so I put the pants right sides facing, matched up my seams and then pinned and sewed all around. So now it's time for the finishing touches, and you know what this means, we're nearly at the end. So I just marked where I wanted my buttonhole to go and used the buttonhole function on my machine to do it. And I did try to show you what I was doing, but my hair just wanted a bit of attention, so I'm sorry about that guys. But once the buttonhole was sewn, I carefully opened it up with a seam ripper, and then I closed the pants and marked right in the middle so that I know where to put my button. I decided to use my machine to attach it by doing a zigzag stitch in between the holes, but I didn't even set it to the correct width and it just snapped the button in half. So if you're gonna do this, be careful. And you know what's funny? I did this to make things easier, but it probably would have just been better for me to do it by hand. But moving on, now we're on to the hemming, which is the last step. So I just marked 2 centimeters from the bottom of my pant using a water soluble marker, overlocked the edge, folded the fabric up to that line and did a straight stitch. Then I got rid of my markings with some water, tidied up my mess and waited for a day to come when it's not raining to film this final reveal. So that brings us to the end of the video guys. Thank you if you made it this far. I hope that you enjoyed the video and again it was clear to understand. I am going to be going over some of the bits like the zipper fly. I am going to do a video trying to explain it a bit more in depth, so look out for those soon. If you have any suggestions of things you want to see me make, please leave them in the comments down below. If you want to see like more photos and that, check out my Instagram at inspiredbymyah.uk and also my TikTok. And what? The door?
We're in a panoramic. What are you doing?
Making patchwork jeans.
That was clean. It was just too perfect of an opportunity to miss, so I had to slide it in like that. But follow my TikTok guys. So overall I am really happy with how the pants turned out. There are a few things that I would want to change naturally. Like at one stage in the project I actually hated them. Like I mean it happens after every time I make something, I always criticize it or whatever, but basically with the hip pockets the lining kept coming out basically and I really didn't like it, so I ended up top stitching the pocket down so they're not usable. But to prevent that in the future, what I would do is the separate piece that I had to attach to the lining fabric, I would just make that bit a bit bigger so that if it does start to peek through you're seeing the main fabric, if that makes sense. Also when I sewed the waistband on the first time it came out way too big. Like I don't know, I was just following the pattern because I made a sample of it and it fit, but I don't know, maybe because it's patchwork I didn't use my seam allowances correctly, I'm not really too sure. So I had to adjust that and unpick the waistband and do it all again, and it really put me off, but I'm glad I did it because everything looks really nice now. The other thing is obviously because of the waistband and it wasn't fitting, I had to take in the trouser and it caused the 2 patch pockets at the back to come really close together and I'm not too keen on that. So again that's something that I'll have to adjust on the pattern and keep in mind. But yeah, I'm not going to criticize it no more. Overall I am really happy with them. I'm actually thinking maybe to make them in like tones of grey next time because I really love grey and like dark grey jeans and stuff, so I might do that next time. But also I wouldn't do too much of the patchwork, like I'd probably only do like a small section. I don't want it to be completely in your face patchwork, I guess on the minimalist side. But yeah, those are just some thoughts I have. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye!